Okay, once again, we're live on the show, and if you're watching this, wait a minute, I'm not the one that does the introductions. It's usually you, Derek. If you're watching us, thank you. If you're watching us and you don't know why, that means somebody probably didn't like you, and they sent you this email to watch this. But my name is Doug Hensley. I teach at the University of Tennessee Tech in the psychology department, and you are watching Psychthoughts. And I get to do Psychthoughts all the time with one of my best friends ever, Dr. Derrick Edwards.
Hey, Doug.
I didn't know he was going
My
to do
screen froze. My screen froze when you hit record. I didn't know what you wanted me to do, so I paused. I'm really over Zoom. I'm over digital meeting. I would like to be in person somewhere with somebody. So, here we go. You are watching Psychthoughts. I don't know why. You don't either. Doug and I have an intern. Her name is Elaine. Say hi, Elaine.
Hi, Elaine. I mean, Derek. I mean, Doug. Somebody.
Anything witty today?
Nope. I spoke all I needed to on the last thing.
Okay. That works. And we're joined by a Psychthoughts regular. You know her as the smart one of the show. And her name is Nicole Henniger. Say hi, Dr. Nicole Henniger. How are you?
Hi, everyone. I'm doing good.
So I don't know why you keep saying yes to the show.
No, I'm actually not changing my name, so it's still Henniger.
I'm glad you said that, because they'd all go, they lied. They said that she was married. Now she's not.
No.
Don't forget to subscribe to our channel. You can do that by clicking the subscribe button, wherever that may be. And then you can share our links with whoever you want. You can make it spam if you want to do that. That'll be fun. You can make it one of those old school, like 1997 email chains. If you don't watch this, something bad will happen. I don't know what you're going to do with it. It'll be a lot of fun. And then don't forget to leave us comments. Always reach out to us, psychthoughts@tentech.edu, psychthoughts@tntech.edu. Today we're going to talk about something that is interesting, which was a change for Psychthoughts. And this will be wicked thoughts. So we'll see what these thoughts are like. I have to go to my resident expert on wicked thoughts. Doug, tell us about it.
Well, I'm glad we're on a topic that I know a lot about, wicked thoughts. So, let me get my book of big wicked thoughts out and read from it. What's really funny is...
What are we talking about when we say wicked thoughts? We're talking about wishing bad things on people, being excited when bad things happen to others, those types of wicked thoughts. I know none of you watching have ever had a wicked thought. So that's pretty exciting.
Oh, I have. I got a list of scorn. You know that. I'm going to be the honest one out of this group. Except my wicked thoughts are a little bit more hedonistic wicked thoughts. So
I'm from the Midwest, so we're not allowed to have wicked thoughts. I feel like in the South, you're allowed to think it. You have to say it in a really backhanded way. But in the Midwest, you're not even allowed to think it. It just is.
Like, bless your heart.
It's like that's such a Southern thing. But in the Midwest, even that would be not allowed. Like, too aggressive. Too direct.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, no.
All we can say is,
we love to talk nice.
Oh. That's all you're allowed.
Oh.
That's the extent, right?
It's like there's a little eye thing and a nod. Oh.
And now I'm going to watch for that every time I talk to her. Or tell her something, she goes, oh. Like,
oh.
I had a student talk to me about an FU pie that was from her family's culture. So, like, if you were really, really mad at someone or you really didn't like them, you would bake them a pie and you would bring it to them. You're like, I was just thinking about you and I just wanted you to have this pie, which is very underhanded. I like that a lot.
That's fantastic. I approve of that.
Yeah, I kind of want the pie. I don't know.
Go around irritating people just so you get a free pie out of the deal.
Yeah. Because
Make Judas
nothing would make me
rhubarb
feel
pie.
worse than pumpkin, you know?
Oh my gosh.
All right, Doug, take us on. Where are we headed?
Where are we headed? Holy cow! I didn't know I was going to have to lead this boat. I was looking over the notes, which I'm looking at. I read my emails. Why am I being called on? Let's call it, hey, I'm going to cheat. I want to cheat. Let us now talk to the smart one of the group. You know, the one that focuses on emotions and the social side.
So Elaine, what do you think about all this?
Let's hear from our esteemed colleague now.
Okay, I just want to say I was sent the notes about 2 minutes ago, and we've been recording for a minute and a half. So I don't know. I was curious about what this topic was, is why I'm here. I don't actually know anything about it. Tell me about Wicked Thoughts.
Well, I do know the more you try to go, I'm not going to have any of these thoughts, the more they creep in.
That's something we were discussing before we started recording, which this article that I got it from in Psychology Today called the Hydra Effect, where when you try to suppress one thought, it seems to pop up more and more, or similar thoughts pop up more and more. And I was informed that there's another title for that effect as well.
It's called an ironic process.
Thank you.
And we can all experience them, right? So if right now I told you don't think about the beach, whatever you do, don't think about the warm, salty air or the sound of the waves crashing, suddenly what you'll find yourself doing is thinking about the beach. So by definition, we can't think about not thinking about something. It doesn't work. And this comes into play in my world as a therapist when I'm dealing with someone who's had a traumatic event, because it doesn't make a lot of sense to want to think about this traumatic event. But what I find is that the more you try not to think about the traumatic event, the more it consumes you. In fact, in the 1980s, we're seeing in the notes, thank you, Elaine, for the notes, we'll see in a 16-hour day, people have about 500 thoughts that are unintrusive or unintentional and intrusive. They last for about 14 seconds. That's a lot of seconds. If you think 500 times 14 is some math. And then those are all unwanted and intrusive. So that's a lot. The more we try to avoid, now every student of mine will say avoid avoidance, but the more we try to avoid, the bigger this grows and becomes a part of our life. Don't touch the red button. I'm touching the button.
Yeah, and Carl Jung also termed something called the shadow self. And that's the unconscious part of our psyche, which has more of our basic animal instincts and dark desires. And, you know, if we repress that, then we honestly, it just keeps coming out more and more. It's a natural phenomenon, if you will.
Well, now, Carl believed that in order for us to be who we are, we had to have both of those dynamics in us, you know, the good and the bad, the yin and the yang, they both had to balance out depending on which one we're going to give into. The shadow is not necessarily something that would be considered to be all bad, but it is, you know, associated with the primal things that we have. I was looking over these first notes and it kind of disturbed me that, you know, it's talking about those intrusive thoughts where it said 13% of these were downright shocking, murderous, and perversion acts. I'm like, how did they get people to be honest enough to say that? You know, I talk to somebody and go, I'll just shoot them if I thought about it. Really? Are we that? It's kind of a. So. All I can think of is wicked thoughts. It's all that's going through my mind.
Yeah, it's helpful to know that people have these thoughts, because if you're out there and you're having some pretty wicked thoughts, just understand that you're not alone and that you're not broken, right? Like, this is a part of your human experience, your human existence. I had a professor once who said 90% of people admit to thoughts of killing themselves at some point in their life. 10% of people lie when you ask them if they've ever thought of killing themselves. And another way of saying that is it's kind of a ubiquitous thought, right? That this is something that's going to go through your brain. You're driving over the bridge on the way somewhere, and you're like, I could run off this dude right now. That's a pretty common thought. Now, I like to tell my patients, remember, you can't murder yourself, right? Suicide doesn't happen for people who don't want suicide, right? So as long as you can recognize these thoughts and you understand that you don't want this, then we can seek help, and we can start to get to a better place. But trying to avoid those thoughts doesn't make a lot of sense. Other disorders that come to my mind are like postpartum depression or postpartum bipolar disorder, when often it's the wicked thoughts that we shame ourselves about, which lead to this escalation of behaviors. There's a reason when you leave the hospital, they tell you 1,000 times, don't shake this baby. And they're serious about it, because at some point in your young parent life, you're like, I think I'm supposed to shake this baby. I'm pretty sure because that's what happens, right? If you shame yourself for having that thought, then that thought you try to avoid, it grows more and more and more and takes more and more of your life. This idea that thoughts somehow are bad is not a thought that I can get behind at all.
Well, that's like when we were just doing the show on pornography. That creates a cycle where people are shaming themselves for doing something, and so they do it more because of the shame that they feel, and it becomes this vicious cycle that they get involved in. And it works that way for any of these wicked thoughts too. There's a difference between thinking them and acting on them.
A massive difference.
Like one of the topics too is prejudice thoughts. But that even comes from an evolutionary standpoint where we have our own set of people, people that are on the outskirts that are different. We don't tend to communicate and hang out with as much, and that's just the way it's been for survival purposes.
So if it's something that we're not supposed to be controlling our thoughts, but we do want to control our actions, and do our thoughts contribute to our actions? Is there a way that we should be trying to have self-control or edit or revise in some way?
I'm a big fan of processing those thoughts. So, what's going on when you're having those thoughts? What's behind just the blanket thought? If we just have a thought and run with it, right? That's, I think sometimes, to your point, Dr. Henniger, people will say, well, that's not helpful either, because you're correct. I don't want you to turn the wheel hard right. I want you to continue heading down I-40, right? But evaluating, why did I have this thought, and what's going on in my life right now? I think that's important. That's the process of psychotherapy. That's our job, right? Not to numb or suppress a thought, but to understand the origin so that we can make these corrective actions in our life. Marvin Zuckerman. So Zuckerman's work was a part of my dissertation. I studied a little bit of sensation seeking as maybe a reason emergency responders don't burn out. I was very wrong, by the way. Sensation seeking had absolutely nothing to do with emergency responders, because the job is pathologically boring, right? It doesn't sound boring. You're like, there's a siren and the fire engine's moving 1,000 miles an hour that way and stopping it at an intersection because of an SOK-free is a real thing. And then that all sounds fun, but all the time in between there is like paperwork and order and just not a lot of fun to do. Like you can't go do a lot of fun things on your own. You have to be told to go do them in the emergency responder world. But Zuckerman's idea of sensation seeking as a way that we get a dopamine hit. So people who are overly fascinated by things that are difficult to see, right, or difficult to experience, that they might just have a sensation seeking component about them. And my brain goes to the bad accident on the interstate that we slow down and look with morbid curiosity.
Well, and all the people that watch like horror flicks or serial killer movies or that kind of thing too.
Yeah. You know, we look at people who are in pain and struggling. Um, I don't know when this memory is from, but it's from a time when Blockbuster Video was a thing. For some of you, you're going to need to Google that. But they used to have these videos, and they were called Faces of Death. Do any of you remember those videos?
No.
Yeah.
This in the horror section, because I did not go there.
Well, it was hard to get because it was banned in 42 countries.
Yeah, just not this one.
Okay. It's a great, if you had a class and you wanted to teach critical thinking skills and you didn't care if it was really gruesome, this video was like allegedly videos of people who actually die. Okay. And, you know, they show people that, you know, maybe they had been in a car accident or something. And the other ones, you know, that they were made up. Like one of them, my favorite one is like, this film was snuck out of this foreign country where this person was drawn and quartered, you know, by horses. And they show this guy and his body, his arms and legs tore off. And I'm like, wouldn't they notice somebody carrying a camera around during this whole thing? Or do they have this giant hat on going, don't bother, look at me? I mean, a lot of it, you know, was kind of put in there for the shock value, but I don't think it was real, you know. But
you know, that's something that sells. I mean, in the era of the coronavirus, right? We are really drawn to a couple of numbers, and one of those numbers is how many people have died because of this virus. It's one of the top search histories. It would make more sense to say, what can I do to stop the spread, or how can I benefit myself? But no. We get on the Google machine or whatever we're on, and we say, hey, how many people have died from this, and what does that look like? And the media continues to just push those numbers out to us. I think of shows like the Jerry Springer Show as maybe an example of how we enjoy disorder. We enjoy watching this chaos, because I mean, you never knew who was going to be the mama / daddy in that show, and it just really drew people into it. I always rooted for Steve because I like order.
And he was bald.
What are you saying, Elaine?
I just meant that he was bald.
That seems like an interesting topic to bring up right now.
If you think about it this way, do we actually promote wicked thoughts? Because, you know, when you tell people, don't be prejudiced, don't think of this, don't think of that, and the more you go, okay, I'm not going to think about it, and then you start going, oh dear, I am. I mean, it's almost like we're perpetuating the problem. You know, instead of saying, we should say, okay, the recovery rate of the virus is, you know, 85%. But instead we go, you know, fatality rate is 35%. I mean, we focus more on negative, which causes us to think more on the negative. It kind of goes back to the last video. If you haven't watched it, it's your chance. Where we talked about 80% of people in a conversation do what? Complain. So I guess we're just doomed. There, you heard it first on Psychthoughts. We're doomed.
So from an evolutionary standpoint, it kind of makes sense of like, well, should you focus on the good or should you focus on the bad? Like, the bad is what will kill you, so it makes sense to really pay attention. And so we are set up to pay attention to the bad, but for good reason. It's helpful to us. So like, thank you, brain, for pointing out this dangerous thing, but then being able to go past that and think about something else to see the good. Like, I don't think we'll be able to stop thinking about the bad. It's not just a character flaw, right? It's actually useful for us overall. If we weren't paying attention to the bad, that would be bad too.
Oh, yeah.
It's interesting. You know, you're on a scene somewhere, as you know, in my previous life with fire EMS, and you've seen some things that they're bad, right? I mean, you can't unsee them. Those tend to be the details that people want to know when they ask you about it. You know, that they want it. Well, what did they look like? You know, and you don't want to know. You don't want that. You don't want that memory at all. But they're very drawn to that. And I think, aside from an evolutionary perspective, which I absolutely am in line with you, it's good to be able to predict the stuff that will kill us, right? That's important. We need to be able to do that. Otherwise, we're just like, I think I can jump off this building and be fine, but you can't. I can prove it, right? I think the other thing is we are incredibly fascinated with stuff that we can't experience or stuff that we can't understand. So that maybe that existential dilemma of that inherent fear of our death, we want to know as much as we can about the topic so that we can somehow put it in a nice little box where we put like puppies. No, don't put puppies in a box. It's a metaphorical box. Oh crap.
Especially not
Peter's
with
gonna
death.
fall over this one.
This box I put on my shelf labeled puppies and death.
Are they alive or are they dead?
It's a very strange shelf. It's right here in my shelf. That's my puppies and death shelf.
But now what you're talking about, Derek, kind of goes back to a little bit of vicarious conditioning. You know, maybe it's a way that we learn, you know, because we watch people have these accidents, or you watch people and you go, I don't experience that because I know that would hurt. And so that kind of moves into the evolutionary side. You know, when someone goes, here, do you want to get on one of these skateboards? And you go, I watch enough videos. You know, I know I'm going to fall or I'm going to be in a world of hurt. But we like to watch them. I can't tell you how many times I watched that. What was the football player that got his knee, his leg bent the wrong way, and they kept showing it. And every time they show it,
over and over again.
I'd go, oh. So.
Let's go through some of these. How many did you list here, Elaine, of types?
Oh, the different types of thoughts?
Yes, several. You got one here. Sexually perverse thoughts. I like that you started with that one. You wanted to draw Doug into it.
That's why I read it.
I think there's
if
5.
If you ever want Doug to read an email, you know, just always include those thoughts.
And now you see, the important thing it says here is not all thoughts should be taken at face value.
Absolutely. Or any other value for that matter, Doug. Let's be careful. This is another example where I think people start to shame themselves, and that gets in the way. You know, I've had a large number of patients who have had dreams about other people, and they'll say things like, oh, I'm such a bad person because of that. Like, I don't think you chose your dream, you know? And if you did, we could get into dream theory if we wanted to, which we don't, but we could, and we could realize one of those options is that it's kind of just a garbly goop brain trying to figure some stuff out. But thoughts are pretty natural. To Dr. Henniger's point from a moment ago, what we do with those thoughts matters a great deal, right? So if I always say an affair doesn't happen at the moment we think it does. You know, affairs happen with our thought life, and in our marriages, if we are constantly in our thought life about other people and we continue to escalate that a little further, and then, you know, oh, now it's just text messages, or it's just social media, or it's just flirting. And then by the time we've made it to the affair's happened a long time ago, right? So it's about guarding our thought life, but not avoiding it, understanding that's a part of who you are. I think this is especially true if you are a young adolescent, you know, or in your life right now, the things that are going on in your brain, they're mostly that, you know, that's what it is. Calculus is a struggle to fit in there based on all those other thoughts.
Put calculus in there now.
That's a different box on the shelf.
It's a different box.
It's over here. Am I the only one going to speak to sexual perverse thoughts? That's fun.
I thought that was Doug's topic.
Well,
I did too. I was really setting them up.
All I can say is, hey, they're good. Keep them to yourself. But you know, you can't go any farther than what Nicole said. I mean, we all have these thoughts, but the problem is when they become an action or a behavior. I mean, you know, we've all been mad at somebody and think I'd like to punch them in the nose, but we don't. I mean, you know, we have all these thoughts, whether they be sexual or violent in nature, but I think it becomes that point where you start to act on them. Okay? And in your scenario, Derek, when you're talking about the affair, if you see somebody and you go, well, that's a good looking woman, that's one thing. But then when you start acting on it, like, well, I want to talk to them, I want to text them, then it's, there's an action to that behavior. There's stuff that's going on, that's when it becomes, there's a problem. But we always consider that you're not allowed to think that, you're not allowed to think this person's attractive. This person I am attracted to. This person's this. There's nothing wrong with that. I mean, that's like trying to go against human nature because, you see things and you go, well, that person's very attractive. They're very beautiful, blah, blah, blah. But when you cross that action, when you start to act on it is when it becomes an issue or a problem. I mean, you'd be silly to think that, everybody, your mate's always going to think you're the most beautiful person in the world, but everybody, what was it, that Friends episode? I have 5 people that I can have an affair with, if I run into them accidentally, so, which I have not met any of the 5.
This goes into Lawrence Kohlberg versus Carol Gilligan, doesn't it, Doug? Kohlberg would have said exactly what you're saying. Thoughts are thoughts, actions are what separate us. But, Carol Gilligan, who brought in the feminist perspective, said simply thinking it is as bad as doing it. That's why I never listened to her, because that scared me a lot. Kohlberg would have said, getting caught up in traffic, wanting to run that car off the road and watch it flip over and over in a blaze of glory is one thing. Doing it's another story. Carol Gilligan would say, like, if you're thinking about doing it, it's just as bad. And I think, for me, that's too far of a line. Recognizing the thought as not a thought I want to go down, not an action plan that I want to utilize. For me, that when we talk about taming our thought life, that process is where it comes in. What about prejudice thoughts? What do you got there?
I think that's something where it is really, I think it is really useful to realize that you're having it because, those thoughts come from what we're taught from society. It's something we see very young, that children have those thoughts. And so it's not like it's coming out of you and your logical, thinking. It's just that society has taught us this. But when you can realize it, then you can sort of change your actions to try to counteract that. Because I think that is part of it of like, okay, yeah, it's fine to have a thought, but also at the same time, you can't just be like, oh, I'm fine having whatever thoughts I want to have. I can think about cars rolling over and I can enjoy that privately, but still that is going to shape your behaviors. Like if you're making that choice to have that reaction to that thought. And so I think the same thing is true with prejudice thoughts. Okay, yeah, it's good not to say it out loud, but even better is to take a counteraction against that, to sort of then logically think through it and say, like, okay, I had this thought, that's fine. Society has taught me that thought. What can I do to try to change that pattern?
I was reading the article and see what you think about this take. He's talking about the brain scan and talking about how people who are prejudiced, that certain areas of the brain are more active than others. Did you see that? I wonder if your brain is more, acts up more because if you're prejudiced, you seek out to see things that's going to prove that, well, I'm prejudiced and that's it. But then maybe your brain sees things that's going to go show you the bias that, oh no, that's not always the norm. And so you try to rationalize, well, that's just, the norm because, I come to the old school that prejudice is a learned behavior. We learn that. We're not born, to be prejudiced or racist. We learn that. And so, I kind of wonder if you kind of become at odds with yourself because, everything that you've always been told or the propaganda you've been told, this, and then when you meet someone or see a certain thing, you're like, well, that's not what I thought. Does that cause that tension or that makeup in the brain?
Yeah. And there's sort of, so like what Elaine brought up earlier with there being in-group and out-group. So there is sort of that natural process, but there's more to it than that because we have a lot of out-groups. One of my out-groups is the rich, right? And so I have a different set of prejudices towards the rich that I'm not a part of versus a particular racial group that I'm not a part of, right? That we have stereotypes that are specific towards particular groups. And it's not just in-group, out-group, although that process maybe is what we're born with, right? That we also have these really nuanced societal parts to it too. and that people can be prejudiced even when they're part of the group. So as a woman, I could still have prejudice against women being in leadership positions or being in science or whatever it might be, where it's not just us and them, but yeah, that also, society has taught us that prejudice where I could have a woman coming and applying for a position and maybe have a slight prejudice where I wouldn't see her as being as good of a potential leader or whatever it might be.
My problem's women drivers.
My problem is people who have 20 items and 5 items or less. Like, I want to go, can you not count?
Schadenfreude, what do you got there?
With what?
Schadenfreude.
I'm sorry. I put my notes down because I was looking at the time and I knew it was running out of time.
That's when you feel better because somebody else is going through a hard time or has something bad happen to them or whatever.
It's a very German concept.
Yeah. Absolutely. Is that your prejudice, Dr. Henniger? Is it about Germans?
Against my own group,
wow.
Yes.
Yeah. It's this, I think, typified in a fail video compilation off of YouTube, right? Watching people fail somehow makes us feel better. I don't like that, For me, that's one of those things that I think we need to start guarding ourselves against, because that becomes a really scary path to start running down, right?
Exactly.
People falling is funny.
It is something that we see. So this, there's a lot of research on envy and Schadenfreude, and envy is one of my areas. So when we envy somebody, so if there's somebody who is way better than us and then they fail, and we just have this intense Schadenfreude, right? That pleasure. And so it's much more likely when we have somebody who's high status, especially someone who we don't think deserves it to begin with, and then they fall from grace, and there's that pleasure in that. Which is kind of different than just seeing random people trip and fall. It's sort of, there's a hierarchy that we're trying to work our way up. And if we can see, if somebody else falls down, then we can work up higher on that hierarchy.
So is this like tabloid type gossip then at that point where that becomes more pleasurable?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Like, they're all rich, they're all fine. And then then something happens to them.
The article brought up watching somebody just walk down the street and fall, or Paris Hilton walk down the street and fall. Mm. They find it funnier that it's Paris Hilton walking down the street and falling than just some random person off the street.
The thing to do, some research would be to compare that thought with people who put a lot of stock in social comparison. Because, if you see somebody that you feel is better than you fail, then that makes you feel better because well, now they're like me, normal. So that'd be interesting to look at.
So as our time winds down here on Psychthoughts, we want to say thank you for listening and for watching the show. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel, share our videos with other people, even people you don't like. As I've said on most every episode, we don't mind being the fruitcake of psychology radio shows or talk shows. So you can give this to people you don't like as a gag gift. We're fine. If you wanted to sell our links at Spencer's Gifts, I think that's probably okay with us as well. But we do appreciate you joining us. Don't forget to email us any questions you have about psychology. It might keep us on track one day. I'm Derek. I'm joined by Doug, our special guest, who's become our regular guest, Dr. Henniger, and as always, our intern, Elaine. Until next time, we'll see you.
Bye.